Hi, Cookie Kid. Here's another great story for you today.
Jack and the Beanstalk. Once upon a time, there was a boy named Jack who lived with his mother in a small run-down cottage. They were very poor, and the only thing they owned of value was a skinny old cow named Daisy. Jack's father had died when he was just a baby, and now it was up to Jack and his mother to make ends meet, though their luck was running out. One morning, Jack's mother sighed as she looked out the window at their tiny garden, where only a few wilting vegetables struggled to grow. "Jack," she said, her voice heavy with worry, "we've run out of money, and the garden's not giving us enough food. We've no choice. We have to sell Daisy." Jack stared at his mother in shock. "But Mother, Daisy is all we have left. She's part of the family." "I know, Jack," she said softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "But without money, we'll starve. Take her to the market and get a good price. Maybe then we can afford enough food to last us through the winter." Jack bit his lip. He loved that cow, but he knew his mother was right. With a final nod, he took Daisy's rope in hand and set off down the dusty road. His heart was heavy, but he kept walking, wondering what the future held for him and his mother. On his way to the market, Jack kicked at the dirt, lost in thought. Suddenly, an old man appeared on the side of the road, leaning on a crooked stick. His eyes twinkled like he knew something Jack didn't. "Good morning, young man," the old man said with a toothy grin. "That's a fine cow you've got there. Where are you off to with her?" Jack hesitated. "I'm taking her to market to sell her. My mother and I don't have enough food, so we need the money." The old man chuckled softly. "Money, you say? Well, what if I told you I had something far more valuable than money?" Jack raised an eyebrow. "More valuable than money? What could be better than food on the table?" Reaching into his coat, the old man pulled out 5 small beans. They didn't look special, just beans, really. Jack frowned. "Beans?" Jack said, unimpressed. "How will beans help us?" "These aren't just any beans," the man whispered, leaning closer as if sharing a secret. "They're magic beans. Plant them tonight, and by morning they'll grow higher than you can imagine. They'll bring you more riches than you ever dreamed." Jack was skeptical, but there was something in the old man's eyes that made him curious. Could the beans really be magic? Could they really save his mother and him? "All right," Jack said finally, handing over Daisy's rope. "I'll take the beans." The old man gave Jack the beans with a wink. "You won't regret it, lad. Just you wait." Jack hurried home, feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. What would his mother say about the trade? When Jack returned home, his mother was waiting anxiously by the door. "Did you sell Daisy?" she asked hopefully. "I did," Jack said, holding out the beans. "Look, Mother, I traded her for these magic beans. They're going to make us rich." His mother's face turned red, and her eyes flared with anger. "Magic beans!" she shouted. "You traded our only cow for a handful of beans? Oh, Jack, how could you be so foolish?" Before Jack could say anything, his mother snatched the beans from his hand and threw them out the window in a fit of rage. "There's no such thing as magic!" she cried. "Now we have nothing!" Jack felt awful. He hadn't meant to make things worse. With a heavy heart, he went to bed hungry, feeling like he had failed. But just as he drifted off, he couldn't help but wonder, what if the old man was right? The next morning, Jack woke to a sight he could hardly believe. Right outside his window, a massive beanstalk had sprung up overnight, twisting and stretching high into the sky, disappearing into the clouds. The beans really are magic, Jack exclaimed, jumping out of bed. He ran outside and stared in awe at the beanstalk, which was as thick as a tree trunk. Without a second thought, Jack grabbed one of the sturdy vines and began to climb. Up, up, up Jack climbed, higher than he had ever been before. Finally, he broke through the clouds, and there, towering before him, was an enormous stone castle. It looked ancient and mysterious. Who could live here, Jack wondered, feeling a mix of excitement and fear. He made his way to the huge front door and knocked. To his surprise, it creaked open, revealing a giant woman standing in the doorway. She was so tall that Jack had to tilt his head all the way back to see her face. "Who are you?" she boomed, her voice as deep as thunder. "I'm Jack," he said, his knees trembling. "I climbed the beanstalk and found your castle." The giantess looked worried. "You must leave at once, boy. My husband is a giant, and if he finds you here, he'll gobble you up in one bite." Jack shivered at the thought, but his stomach growled loudly. "Please," he said, "I'm so hungry. Could you spare some food?" The giantess softened, her frown easing. "Very well," she said, ushering him inside, "but you must hide when my husband returns." She gave Jack some bread and cheese, but just as he finished eating, the ground began to shake. The giant had returned. "Hide!" the giantess said, pushing Jack into a large cupboard. Jack peeked through a crack in the door as the giant stomped into the room, sniffing the air. "Fee, fi, fo, fum. I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread." "Nonsense," the giantess said. "There's no one here." Grumbling, the giant sat down and pulled out a heavy sack of gold coins, counting them one by one. Soon his eyelids drooped, and he fell asleep, his snores rumbling like thunder. Jack's eyes widened as he stared at the gold. "That money could save us," he whispered. Quietly, he crept out of the cupboard, grabbed the sack, and hurried out of the castle. When Jack reached the bottom of the beanstalk, he ran straight to his mother. "Mother, look!" Jack said breathlessly, holding up the sack of gold coins. "I climbed the beanstalk, found a giant's castle, and took this treasure." His mother's eyes widened in disbelief. "Jack, how on earth did you manage that?" "I'll explain later," Jack grinned. "But now we can buy food and everything we need." For a while, Jack and his mother lived comfortably with the gold, but eventually the coins began to run out. Jack couldn't stop thinking about the giant's castle and the treasures it might still hold. "I'm going back up the beanstalk," Jack announced one morning. His mother looked worried. "Jack, you've already taken a great risk. What if the giant catches you this time?" "I'll be careful," Jack promised, though he felt a thrill of excitement at the thought of another adventure. So once again, Jack climbed the beanstalk. When he reached the castle, the giantess saw him and sighed. "You're back? You must be mad, boy. My husband will eat you if he catches you." "Please," Jack said. "I'm hungry again." Reluctantly, the giantess gave Jack some bread, but soon after, the ground began to shake. The giant had returned. "Hide quickly," the giantess said, and Jack darted into the cupboard, just as the giant came thundering into the room. "Fee, fi, fo, fum. I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread." "Don't be silly," his wife said, though her eyes flicked nervously toward the cupboard. "There's no one here." The giant grumbled and sat down. This time he pulled out a hen from a cage.
Lay!
He commanded, and to Jack's amazement, the hen laid a golden egg. Jack's heart raced. If I had that hen, we'd never be poor again, he thought. When the giant fell asleep, Jack quietly crept out of the cupboard, snatched the golden hen, and hurried down the beanstalk once more. Jack and his mother were now better off than ever, thanks to the hen that laid golden eggs, but Jack couldn't stop thinking about the giant's castle. There had to be more treasures up there, waiting to be discovered. I'm going back one more time, Jack told his mother. No, Jack, she pleaded. You've been lucky twice, but the giant will catch you if you go back. I'll be careful, Jack reassured her, but deep down he knew this trip would be the riskiest yet. For the third time, Jack climbed the towering beanstalk. When he reached the top, the giantess frowned at him. Back again, she said, shaking her head. You've got more nerve than sense. Jack smiled sheepishly. I'm just looking for a bit more food. Sighing, the giantess let him in and fed him some bread. But just as before, the ground rumbled with the return of the giant. Hide quickly, she urged. Jack slipped into the cupboard as the giant burst through the door, his voice booming. Fee, fi, fo, fum. I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread. There's no one here, the giantess said, though her voice trembled. She glanced nervously around the room as the giant stomped to the table. This time, the giant pulled out a golden harp, beautifully crafted with strings that shimmered like sunlight. When the giant commanded, play. The harp began to play the most enchanting music Jack had ever heard. The melody was so beautiful, it made Jack forget the danger he was in. I must have that harp, Jack thought. With its music and the hen's golden eggs, we'll never have to worry about anything again. But as soon as the giant fell asleep and Jack took the harp, it suddenly cried out, Master! Master! Help! The giant woke with a roar. Thief! He bellowed, jumping to his feet. Jack's heart raced as he sprinted for the door, clutching the harp tightly in his arms. Jack ran as fast as his legs could carry him, but the giant was right behind him, shaking the ground with every step. The beanstalk loomed ahead, but Jack wasn't sure he could make it before the giant caught him. Mother! Jack shouted as he began to slide down the beanstalk, the harp still in his arms. Mother, help! The giant is chasing me! His mother ran out of the cottage, her face pale with fear. Jack, what have you done? No time to explain, Jack gasped as he reached the ground. Get the axe! Hurry! His mother grabbed the axe and handed it to Jack, just as the giant began climbing down the beanstalk, his roars echoing through the sky. Jack swung the axe with all his might, chopping at the base of the beanstalk. The giant was halfway down when the beanstalk began to sway and crack. With one final swing, the beanstalk snapped, and the giant came tumbling down with a deafening crash. The earth shook as the giant hit the ground, and then silence. The giant was gone, swallowed by the earth beneath him. Jack and his mother stood panting, staring at the broken beanstalk. We did it! Jack said, grinning. We're safe! With the giant gone and the magic harp safely in their possession, Jack and his mother's lives changed forever. The hen continued to lay golden eggs, and the harp played beautiful music whenever they wished. They never had to worry about money or food again. But Jack had learned something more valuable than gold or treasure. He had learned that while being brave and clever could get you far, knowing when to stop taking risks was just as important.